Now, the law firm Hogan Lovells found itself last year embroiled in allegations of enabling state capture after it produced a report used by the South African Revenue Services boss, Tom Moyane, to clear senior SARS official Jonas Makwakwa of misconduct. The firm appeared before Parliament's Standing Committee on Finance on Wednesday, denying allegations levelled against them, maintaining that they upheld the highest professional ethics throughout this matter. Joining me now is Wessel Badenhorst from Hogan Lovells to address the issues that were ventilated by Parliament's Standing Committee regarding Jonas Makwakwa's investigation yesterday. Thanks very much for joining us and welcome to the programme.
Good afternoon, Peter.
All right, so the Deputy Director General Treasury, this is what he had to say. Hogan Lovells issued an incomplete, fatally flawed whitewash of a report which ultimately cleared Makwakwa despite reams of evidence to the contrary. Most damning of all, Hogan Lovells failed to include crucial evidence from the PwC report and status of the Hawks investigation in their own report. What is he not seeing that you have a different version to?
Well, maybe I can start and say that quote is verbatim what Lord Peter Haines said on the 15th of January in the House of Lords.
Right.
That was the statement he made. He based that statement on an article that the Daily Maverick ran shortly after Tom Moyane made the media statement to say that the Hogan Lovells report had cleared Mr. Makwakwa. Now, the difficulty is that when he made that statement and when the Daily Maverick expounds the theory, all the evidence wasn't yet in the public domain. There were only two leaked documents at the time. We had the mandate letter with the outcome of the disciplinary inquiry. So literally the dots were connected from the starting block to the end block, and everybody forgot what happened in the middle because we didn't know. Immediately after that, we corrected Tom Moyane's statement, and what we wanted to have is our report released to the media so that the full conspectus of what we had done had come out. That statement is absolutely untrue.
So when you say corrected Mr. Moyane's statement, are you saying that he lied to Parliament?
When Mr. Moyane made the statement that the Hogan Lovells report cleared Mr. Makwakwa of all of the FIC allegations, it was absolutely untrue. Whether he said it in Parliament, whether he said it in a media conference, it was untrue. There were three investigations that had to happen. There were one investigation, and all three of these had to happen in tandem. You needed to do the investigation into the corruption and organized crime. That was a matter with which the Hawks were seized. In tandem with that, you had to run a tax investigation to determine whether or not there was tax violations. And then you had to do a labor inquiry to determine whether or not there's misconduct and breaches of SARS's internal policies. We were instructed on the labor side of it, and we were waiting for these three investigations to run in tandem, and unfortunately it's history that it didn't.
Who puts up the charges? Was it SARS that gives you the charges to investigate, or do you investigate and come up with things?
Hogan Lovells' brief was to advise SARS in respect of its obligations as the employer of Mr. Makwakwa. So when we received the instruction, we gave advice to SARS to say, let the Hawks investigation happen, the outcome of which, if there was corrupt practices, that would form misconduct. If the tax investigation showed there was tax violations, that would be misconduct. And then the three components would be put together in a set of charges where we would advise SARS.
So are you saying that perhaps your portion ended too quickly?
Peter, what happened was that the two state agencies that had to cooperate in the investigation, the Hawks on the one hand and SARS in the tax investigation, did not fully feed into our inquiry. And then we had a difficult position. The investigation dragged on and on and on, and Mr. Makwakwa was saying, well, it's unfair now. I've been suspended for a long period of time. It's an unfair labor practice. Put to me what you have. And unfortunately, because the Hawks haven't finished their investigation and we don't know the outcome of the tax investigation, we had to put to him what we could prove, and that was all that we had at the time.
And that essentially cleared him of labor misconduct?
That's what it did. It cleared him of the charges that were put to him. What wasn't put to him was corruption and organized crime. What wasn't put to him was tax evasion. We left it open in our report to say those things still have to be investigated. If they show misconduct, then certainly Mr. Makwakwa must come back to another inquiry, and that's where we didn't clear him, and that's where the lie happened.
People at home are busy watching this, and they're saying, how is it that you can say this labor issue was cleared, but surely criminal activity is inherently also a labour issue.
Absolutely. In order to fight corruption, state agencies have to cooperate. It is a complex set of crimes, and various state institutions must work together. What Acting Commissioner Kingang said yesterday in the Standing Committee meeting was that, in hindsight, what SARS should have done is finished its tax investigation, determined whether there was a tax evasion, and then that could have been put to Mr. Makwakwa. The running it in parallel was perhaps, in hindsight, in SARS's view, not the right way to do it.
So once Mr. Moyane misstated, lied, what did you then do?
Mr. Moyane made that statement on the 27th of October. On the 3rd of November, we as Hogan Lovells issued a media statement to say we did not clear Mr. Makwakwa. We were not instructed to investigate all aspects of the FIC report, in other words, the criminal and tax aspects, and we immediately corrected in the media.
Would you say, I mean, because you're appointed and instructed by a client, and I'm just wondering, you've seen the PwC report. Did that inform anything that you did, any part of your investigation, or you just said, okay, we've read it, but we're going to park it to one side?
Peter, there were two PwC reports. There was a PwC report that we commissioned in order to determine the source of the funds. Then there was also a PwC report that dealt with the tax evasion. That was, SARS instructed PwC because of an internal conflict, because Mr. Makwakwa was so senior, we needed to have someone who could objectively determine it. So the tax PwC report we haven't seen. That is confidential under the Tax Administration Act. The PwC report on the source of funds was part of our final report to SARS, and that report shows that many of the accusations put to Mr. Makwakwa were answered by Mr. Makwakwa. Although his answers may not be completely satisfactory, we couldn't investigate it any further within a labour disciplinary inquiry. We didn't have tools to subpoena witnesses and determine whether or not the money that he says he got from friends and family as repayments of loans, we couldn't verify that.
So was there any value then to your part of this investigation? Because in the end, he's quit his job anyway, and he's facing all these criminal activities. That could have happened without your portion.
Peter, there's always value in having an investigation, even if the investigation exonerates a person, because once the allegations are there, you must investigate those allegations. Our part was to determine whether or not there were violations of SARS's internal policies. We couldn't find any violations. The money that he received on travel claims all seemed to be verified, except for a certain portion that SARS didn't have proper records on. But at least what it showed was, in the respect of SARS's internal policies vis-a-vis Mr. Makwakwa, that there were no corruption and violations.
Somebody at home again will say, hang on, this is a kind of situation where you're asked to investigate somebody for jaywalking, but whilst he's jaywalking, he mugs someone, and you say, no, the mugging isn't part of our brief, we're going to park that, let the police deal with it, we'll just deal with the jaywalking.
Peter, I wish it was that simple, but in your example, you're dealing with two crimes investigated by one authority. Here we have three components that have to be investigated in different capacities. And in order to fight that corruption properly and deal with the conspectors of it, you needed those three agencies to work together. What failed us here is that the Hawks had not finished their investigation. We got the insurances from the Hawks right at the beginning of our investigation that they were dealing with it. In fact, they said that the arrest was imminent, and it hadn't happened. And still there's no explanation as to why the Hawks haven't finished their investigation.
So why is Treasury taking this position with you?
What Mr. Moyane had said yesterday is, in the Standing Committee, is that what we're dealing with at the moment is a dual process. We're looking back at mistakes, and we're looking forward as to how do we avoid these mistakes in the future. What Mr. Moyane is very upset about is the frustration that people had in getting the Hogan Lovells report. We have said consistently that privilege attaches to it, and SARS must waive the privilege. And Mr. Moyane's frustration is that this process was prolonged as a result of that. We share that frustration with him, but that doesn't mean that there was a whitewash or that we as Hogan Lovells have turned a blind eye to corruption at SARS.
All right, so we're going to have to leave it there. Wessel Badenhorst, partner at Hogan Lovells, thanks very much indeed for your time and sharing your insights with us on this issue. Thank you.